We have other threats to validity. We have other threats to internal validity that have to do with us influencing our participants in ways that we don't mean to. Now, when we're measuring internal validity, there are also several ways that we could influence our participants in ways that we don't want to do. Simply by participating in this study, a person's behavior is going to change, and even their abilities. And I think we kind of have an understanding of this from the ideas of test anxiety, right? So when you're in a testing situation, you are probably not going to express your true knowledge because the testing environment is changing your abilities at that moment. But there are ways we can classify this with our research participants too. We have what's called reactivity, which really means any kind of way that they are changing their behavior based on knowing that they're being observed. So when there's an observer in the back of the classroom, like used to happen a lot when I was in high school, I think it's because our school was failing and they needed the state to come in and take over some things for a while. But anyways, we had observers in the classroom a lot. We would always be on our best behavior when there was an observer in the room because they were sometimes the principal, sometimes they would be somebody from some state organization, and it didn't show our true behavior in the classroom, right? And that's reactivity. One type of influence is also testing or what's called practice effects. If a research participant takes the same kind of measure multiple times in your study, we may not actually be measuring their true score on that measure at time 1 and then at time 2. We might see an improvement, but it's not because their true score improved. It might just be because they're becoming a better test taker. They know better what the researcher is asking for and they start providing that. We also have what's called the Hawthorne effect, which is where when participants are observed and they know they're in a study, they're automatically going to act better, like that observer in the classroom example I just gave. Sometimes the researcher or observer is doing something in particular that changes that behavior. So it's not just that participants act weird because they know they're being watched. Sometimes we could be influencing things by stuff we're doing too, not just being an observer. So sometimes we have a bias, and this is going to come in a lot with observational studies. Remember when we talked about that inter-rater reliability issue and coding that ambiguous facial expression? Well, I might have a bias that I bring to that in the first place. I might already be in a good mood and I might perceive her facial expression as a smile. If I were anxious, I might perceive her face as anxious. There could also be something about who I am that's influencing what participants do. For example, in a lot of mouse studies, which are still used in some subfields of psychology, they found that male experimenters tended to elicit more fearful and territorial behavior from the mice because the mice could presumably smell their testosterone and they would react differently to that, sort of like they would to a male mouse. They found that female mice did not react this way, and no mice reacted this way to female experimenters. So sometimes characteristics of the experimenter can influence those results. We also find this in humans. There tend to be racial and ethnic differences across scores on standardized tests like IQ tests or the SAT or just about any test. And part of this is due to experimenter effects. Often the people administering these tests are white from the dominant group, and any racial and ethnic minorities come under what's called stereotype threat, where they tend to get worried that they're going to perform poorly and live up to a bad stereotype for their group. Because they're worried about that, it's kind of giving them some test anxiety that's taking cognitive resources away from taking the test. We find that this stereotype threat and this lowering of their scores tends to go away when the person administering the test is from the same social group as the people taking the test. We have what's called expectancy effects, and that's also called demand characteristics. When the participants know what the study is about, sometimes they want to be a really good research participant and give the researcher exactly what they're looking for. So if I were teaching class and I was interested in the effects of meditation on test performance, I might split my class in half, where half of them were the experimental group that meditated, half was a control group that does not meditate. And if I just split the classroom in half and stood over here to one side with one half of the classroom and I asked them to follow my voice through this guided meditation, and I might tell the other group to just sit quietly wearing some earplugs and not pay attention to what's happening over here. Well, if those participants in the control group know what's happening and my participants in the experimental group know what's happening, they all probably expect that the people in the meditation group are going to do better on their tests because of the effect of the meditation. All the participants might unconsciously start conforming to that expectation. We also have what's called social desirability. People are not always the biggest truth tellers when they are taking questionnaires specifically. They tend to respond in ways that they think are normal or what everybody else would expect from them. We're going to look at an example of a way we can measure that. So if you have participants taking a whole bunch of questionnaires, a lot of times we will like to put this social desirability scale in there. If people mark these questions in a socially desirable way, we know that they're probably doing socially desirable responding on all the other items. They're giving us what they think is normal or acceptable instead of what their true feelings are. So we might ask them things like, before voting, I thoroughly investigate the qualifications of all candidates. If people mark high on this, there's a good chance they're lying on other items too. I never hesitate to go out of my way to help somebody in trouble. That's a good thing to do. We like to hear that. So if people mark high on that, they may also mark high on other stuff that they think is what we want to hear. It's sometimes hard for me to go on with my work if I'm not encouraged. Well, actually, we might want people, this one's a little backwards. It might be reverse scored, where if you mark high on this, it's actually considered a bad thing. We might expect people to be very self-motivated workers. So if they marked low on this, showing that they're very self-motivated, they may also be lying about other items. And they might say, no matter who I'm talking to, I'm always a good listener. If they endorse this one highly, they may also be lying in a socially desirable way about other things. So that way we would know that the responses to the rest of the questionnaires that they answered may not be that useful to us. So let's think about how we set up our expectations in a study. How much information have we given potential participants ahead of time? Sometimes we can conceal parts of our study, minor deception in an ethical way if it's approved, to make sure that participants don't know too much so that they won't know what we're expecting of them so that they can give it to us. One way that we could get people to respond in a less socially desirable way and more true to their feelings is protecting their confidentiality or anonymity. When we do internet-based anonymous surveys, we tend to have lower social desirability scores, meaning that people are probably responding with their true feelings rather than just based on social norms.